speaker today is John Milton. He's going to talk to us about how metaphors are far more than just colorful literary decorations. One of the oldest debates in linguistics and psychology is the degree to which metaphors are important in communication, and what role, if any, they play in our thoughts and actions. There is growing evidence that indeed metaphors deeply affect the way we perceive the world and make many of our daily choices. John Milton has degrees in biochemistry, English Lit, education, and computational linguistics. Very long CV. So it's my pleasure to introduce this multi-talented, highly educated man on the subject of metaphors, your brain on metaphors.
I always feel like Janet Jackson when I got to stand. I know I don't look like her.
Yeah? Oh, here we are. Okay. After that introduction, it's going to be hard to live up to that introduction, huh? I'm reminded when Margaret said about highly educated, I'm not that highly educated. I was last time I was here, I said I just haven't decided what I want to be when I grow up yet. There's a story about a high and mighty scholar who needs to go across the river. And it's a story told about Mullah Nasruddin. He's a figure of fun in the Arab world. His nickname is Jaha. And stories are told about him all over Persia, in Iran, all over the Muslim world. And so one time, this high and mighty, highfalutin scholar needs a ride across the river in Mullah Nasruddin's boat. He's got a little boat. He's acting as a ferryman. And so the scholar gets in the boat and he asks Mullah Nasruddin a question. And Mullah Nasruddin answers to the effect that, well, between you and I, and the highfalutin scholar says, well, it should be between you and me, because between is a preposition, and da-da-da-da. Anyway, for you Americans. The scholar says, haven't you been to school? And Mullah Nasruddin says, no, I'm sorry. He says, well, you've wasted half your life. So the scholar gets in the boat, they start rowing across the river, the storm breaks up, yeah, you can guess what's coming. The waves come into the boat, and Mullah Nasruddin asks the scholar, he says, do you know how to swim? And the scholar says, no. And Mullah Nasruddin says, well, you wasted your whole life. So, yeah, so much for education, huh? So I'm using my iPad here because my printer broke down. Oh, yeah. So what have we got over here? I'm assuming that most of you read traditional Chinese, right? No? Okay. My Chinese friends would turn over in their graves at my calligraphy here, but let me explain to you. This sort of tree-like structure here in traditional Chinese means the horizon. So you can see the horizon here. Huh? This symbol down here stands for rain. While I'm talking, maybe you can guess what I'm referring to, what this means in Chinese. Chinese is a highly symbolic language, of course, but it's also highly metaphorical. It's both symbolic and metaphorical. So here we've got things, symbols that stand for horizon, that stand for rain. This is thunder. This symbol, this sign is thunder. And if you add a little squiggly line under it like this, you've got lightning or electricity. The Chinese are very practical. You know, they like to combine things together. This sign here is called a radical in Chinese, and it appears before several words. And it's it means something like meat, or more specifically like flesh, like the flesh on your body. These signs signify stream or flow, and this means smart. This means smart. Okay, tell me what it means. What is that? This means, this part of the equation means electric. This part means brain. Altogether, it means electric brain, or in English, computer. So, both symbolic and highly metaphorical. I'll come back to this thing about brains and computers a little later. So each language tends to have, to some degree, very similar metaphors that we use. How many metaphors did you hear in the song that was just played? We are what? Children of angels? What else was it?
Circle of light.
Children of light, was it?
Looking for the light.
Right. So many metaphors, huh? We use metaphors every day, and we're not aware of them very often. It wasn't until about 1980 that a couple of authors called LaCave and Johnson wrote a book called Metaphors We Live By, which started a revolution of sorts in cognitive linguistics. And we have experimenters, researchers, trying to find out if indeed metaphors are central to the way we communicate and the way we think. I hope you don't think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill, by the way. Huh? It's a metaphor. Right? I'm having trouble reading this in the light, but so we've already been engaged in a highly metaphorical meditation here. The word etymologies are very interesting. The origins of words, metaphor. Meta is from metaphor is from Greek. Meta means to carry over. Foreign means something similar, also to, as in a bridge, to carry over a bridge. So it's kind of an emphasis on carrying over or making one thing similar to another. Of course, the algorithm for metaphor is x equals y. My love is like a red rose. That's actually a simile. Metaphors bring them a little bit closer. My wife is the light of my life, even if she doesn't always agree with me. So etymologies are very interesting. The word cosmos, we all know what the word cosmos means, right? It's from the Greek for order. Well, for the longest time, until actually quite late in the 20th century, the word cosmos was used to refer to a woman's hairdo. A woman's hairdo was her cosmos. And that's why we still use the word cosmetics today. And now, of course, to most of us, cosmos is the universe. So what we think of as order has changed its priorities. It used to be women and women's hairdo. Now we think of the universe. Yeah, do we? Not all men do. There's so many metaphors in everyday use. Blockbuster. Blockbuster used to be a bomb in the Second World War that would destroy at least a block, right? You know, Blockbuster is a movie. Huh? So metaphors change. So much of our speech is metaphorical. There are dangers with metaphors. We can have abusive metaphors. When we call people names, that's abusive metaphor. We can have we can make the mistake of what's called reification, when we confuse the metaphor with the real thing. The song. I mean, in the song, are angels real or are they metaphorical? Do they stand for something spiritual or do they really exist in this world? If you believe they really exist in this world, scientists would tell you you're making the mistake of reification, rather than imagining them as metaphorical and beyond this world. So metaphors are a bit tricky. This book that I referred to, LaCave and Johnson, they introduced the concept of conceptual metaphors. Conceptual metaphors are metaphors that are linked to the human body. So when we say things like, I feel up, when we equate happiness with a feeling of verticality, when we equate happiness with being high or up or that sort of thing, then we're comparing a non-physical thing, an abstract thing, to the physical body. That's what the term conceptual metaphor means. So another creature, someone who didn't have our body, would think of metaphors in a different way, would think of the world in a different way than we do. And I'll try to talk a little bit about that. So, for example, we often think of quality in terms of quantity. You know that hideous commercial where you have this guy in a suit interviewing children, and he's asking questions like, is more better? Something like that. I think it's a commercial about a bank or something like that. Even children understand that more is better. So they say, they talk about, they refer to better things in terms of quantity, when in fact that's a metaphorical thought, that better things aren't necessarily measured in terms of quantity. We talk about the stock market, for example, rising and falling. Stocks don't rise and fall. So, I mean, again, that comes from our primitive, almost childish consciousness of things rising and falling. Stocks don't rise and fall. There aren't a right wing and a left wing to the American political party. I mean, the American bird is pretty strange, right? It has a left wing and a right wing, and the wings are always fighting with each other, huh? But this is the way we conceptualize the world around us. Abstract things are often too difficult for us to really understand, and so we have to use these physical equivalences to try to understand them. Those physical equivalences are often something that relate to our own body. The anterior insula, buried deep within the brain, is an organ of the brain that's responsible for both feeling physical heat, for example, and feeling warmth toward a person. The brain is like Chinese characters. It does double duty in that sense. So we tend to economize, our brain tends to economize in conceptualizing the world around us. It was a famous experiment in which the researchers asked subjects to hold a warm cup of coffee and other subjects to hold a cold cup of coffee. And they set it up in such a way that the subjects wouldn't see a connection between things. And then they asked the subjects to rate the personalities of some people that were applying for a job. And the people who held the warm cup of coffee rated the subjects who were described on paper, rated the subjects as having warmer personalities than the people who held cold cups of coffee. It's quite extraordinary. When subjects were asked, many experiments of the sort, when subjects were asked to remember something that they had done that was immoral or unethical, and then when they were given, again, staged very carefully so that they wouldn't see a connection between these things, and then at the end of the experiment, as they were leaving, they were given a choice between, I think it was a pencil and some antiseptic wipes. The subjects who had remembered unethical behavior tended to choose the antiseptic wipes. They wanted to wash their hands. And those subjects who had been given the opportunity to wash their hands with the antiseptic wipes, at a later stage of the experiment, when they were put in a situation where they had the opportunity to be kind or caring or thoughtful to somebody, tended to be more kind and careful to that person. So, like Pontius Pilate or Lady Macbeth, after they'd washed their hands, their guilt had to some degree dissipated. Subjects were shown words like bingo, Florida, and I think a few other words associated with the retirement community there and here. And then they were asked to go down the hall to meet somebody. The subjects who had been primed with these words, Florida, bingo, and some other words having to do with the elderly, tended to walk more slowly than subjects who hadn't, because of these conceptual metaphors, because the same parts of the brain that are responsible for our physical actions are also responsible for recognizing and understanding metaphors. Extraordinary things. Many, many experiments of this sort. My memory fails me, so let me refer to a few others. So many of these metaphors are centered in the body, have corporal origins. Giving somebody the cold shoulder actually makes them feel colder. When subjects are treated unkindly or when they feel like they've been ostracized in a particular experiment, and then they're asked what the temperature of the room is, on average, they say it's 3 degrees Celsius lower than those subjects who haven't been treated that way. I don't know what Celsius is in American English, but yeah. Sorry, I'm a Canadian, so little digs. Oh, do you know where the expression cold shoulder comes from? To give somebody the cold shoulder. Why do we give people the cold shoulder? It actually doesn't come from the human shoulder. It comes from medieval times. If a guest stayed too long, you stopped serving him warm food. Yeah, and you took the cold shoulder of the pig and you sliced off, and that was the clue that he should feed it. That's where the expression giving somebody the cold shoulder comes from. Etymologies are fascinating things, and even though some of these things, like giving somebody the cold shoulder, are really dead metaphors in the sense that we've forgotten what the metaphorical, the etymological origin of these things. Nevertheless, they're there under the surface. Huh? Yeah. Another experiment. The subjects were given clipboards. And some of the clipboards weighed, I think it was maybe half a pound lighter than other subjects. And those who had the heavier clipboards, when they were asked to analyze, prospective employees for a job, considered that those employees, those prospective employees, were weightier, that they had weightier personalities. They were more inclined to think that those people should be offered the jobs, simply because the subjects were carrying heavier clipboards. So again, the brain made that connection, made that psychological connection somehow. Are you familiar with these experiments? Oh, they're astonishing, really. And this is all lies in the field of cognitive linguistics, and more recently neurolinguistics, where they've started imaging the brain with functional MRI, and in fact determined that there are centers in the brain that are responsible in this sort of way for both the abstract conception of the world around us and for the physical understanding of the world. Let me find something else here that is interesting. Oh yeah, here's another one. Crime. My understanding is that in America, I've been away from North America for many, many years, but my understanding is that in North America, there's a more or less strict division between Republicans and Democrats on their views toward crime. However, again in other studies, when they gave a mixed group of Democrats and Republicans a story to read about viruses, how viruses attack the human body and how they how they can damage the human body, how they can infect the human body, that sort of thing. Those people, whether they were Democrats or Republicans, when later on they were asked what their views about crime and how criminals should be treated, those people wanted to lock up the criminals, to take them away from society, to ostracize them completely, and to give them much longer prison terms than people who had been given other kinds of stories about the world around us. For example, bacteria sometimes being good agents, such a thing as good bacteria. In that case, a crime was considered, from a very different metaphorical point of view, these subjects said, well, criminals should be rehabilitated. So again, the metaphor that was used, the relation that was used affected people's decisions. I'm sure you're aware of the fact that today, in American, and I suppose Canadian and European criminal courts, people with darker skin are more likely to have longer prison sentences than people with lighter skin, especially when they're involved in crimes with light-skinned people. And again, this is all metaphorical. I mean, the color of a person's skin has got nothing to do with how long he should be incarcerated, obviously. But our mind, and judges don't seem to be aware of these things. So the metaphors that we use affect the world around us in very profound ways, and this is something that often escapes us. I'll try to find one or two other examples of this kind of research. When subjects are in a prone position, if you're asked to lie down on a bed, and then you're shown a series of negative words, you will identify those negative words more quickly than when you're standing up. And if you're standing up, you'll identify positive words more quickly than if you're lying down. Whether they can measure it in terms of the size of fonts or how quickly a person can explain what the word means, that sort of thing. So again, being up is positive, being down is negative. We make those associations in our brain without being aware of it. You know what synesthesia is? There are some individuals who can see music, or who can hear paintings. When they see a painting, they hear certain notes, or when they listen to music, they see certain colors. Well, that is very closely related to metaphor, of course. I see a beautiful woman, and I say she's hot. I mean, that's synesthetic. That's synesthesia. Or, you know, I have a rough day. How can you have a rough day? Roughness has to do with tactile feelings. There's no relationship between feeling sandpaper and having a bad day. Huh? So these things often escape our notice because they're so deeply embedded in our everyday life. We talk about belt tightening, and that's seeing is knowing. I see what you mean. How can I see what you mean? Huh? What does vision have to do with knowledge? But we use these metaphors. So why is seeing knowing? Because seeing is our strongest sense. And so we equate that with knowledge, because knowledge is so important to us. Last time I was here, I talked about the unity, or I tried to talk about the unity of science and religion, the fact that, at least I believe, that there's no distinction between scientific truth and religious truth. If that's the case, then what about religious mythologies? What about things like the Garden of Eden? What does the Garden of Eden represent? In scientific terms, does the Garden of Eden is it a metaphor for anything that we know about science? Well, we know, for example, that women, in general, on average, have better color vision than men. Men more often are colorblind than women are. Is it purely coincidence that Eve found the apple first? Is that purely coincidence? You know, I mean, the tree of life. Well, Darwin talked about the tree of life all the time, right? We're all branches or leaves on the tree of life, according to Darwin's metaphor of evolution, right? He talked about natural selection. Is natural selection a metaphor? Yes or no? Well, of course it is. I mean, how could nature select? So the word select denotes an intention. You don't select something accidentally, right? So science is full of metaphors, just as religion is, just as everyday speech is. Many of the scientific discoveries that have been made, of course, have been made on the basis of metaphorical dreams. The man who struggled for years to try to figure out what the benzene molecule looked like had a dream of snakes. The man who invented the sewing machine had a dream of natives with spears with holes in the top of their spears, and then he figured out, oh yes, if I make the needles with holes in the top and position them in the same way as I saw in the dream, then I've got the perfect sewing machine. And that's how sewing machines were invented. So metaphors are important for everyday language. They're important in science. They're important in religion. In North America and in Europe, we love the metaphor of war. Everything is a war. We've got a war on terror. We've got a war on drugs. We've got, what other kinds of wars? We've got dirty wars. We've got trade wars. War on poverty. Every argument is a war in North America especially, right? Let me give you 3 expressions. He attacked every weak point in my argument. It's a war metaphor. Huh? His criticisms were right on target. I demolished his argument. I've never won an argument with him. If you use that strategy, he'll wipe you out. Now, what kind of a world would we have? What kind of a business environment or communicative environment would we have if arguments were not framed as war, but as a dance? Now, that would please my wife very much. She likes dancing, you know. What if we danced with each other instead of had wars with each other when we argued? We'd live in a different world, right? These metaphors have ramifications, have important implications on our daily life. Love, romantic love. Love is a journey, right? It's like a roller coaster. It has its ups and downs. And journeys always come to an end, right? You know Leonard Cohen? Canadians in the audience? Leonard Cohen? Well, Leonard Cohen says, what does he say? He says, love is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. So, again, you know, metaphors can be used so profoundly in that way to contradict these cliches that we build up in our life. And these cliches can be very harmful. I was going to talk about the language of sex, but I'm not sure we're all of the right age. No, okay, I'll take a chance. I see one kid back there, but okay. How do men talk about women? We use metaphors, right? Well, we objectivize women. We all know this. Sex is an achievement, right? I'd like to make it with her. Yeah? Do you mind if I use this language? If I offend anybody, let me know. Huh? I went all the way, with her. I didn't get anywhere with her. So achievement. Sex is measured in terms of achievement. Huh? Sex is performance, of course. You know, for a man, it's performance. Huh? He's good in bed. She's good in bed. Women are objects. Now this is metaphor. I mean, imagine that we, how many hours of television do we watch every day, especially children? More hours of television than sleep or school or anything else, right? And for many of us, including adults, television is the primary, if not the only, source of our information and our culture, really. And why should we be surprised when Arabs think that Westerners are decadent? When this kind of language is very common, and when we teach our children, especially our male children, to think like this. Women are objects. She's a cute thing. She likes to flaunt it. He played her like a violin. Interesting one. Women are animals. Women are animals in the minds of many men. And this is rape language, really. We've heard a lot about rape recently in the news, right? I mean, is it a wonder, really, that this kind of thought leads to certain actions? Women are children. Do you like the girls at the office? Hey, baby. Women are animals. Women are animals. She's a bunny, you know. She's real foxy. I won't use the word for female dog. Why is it that if you call a woman a dog, it's a terrible insult? A female dog. But if you call a man a dog, it's okay. You dog, you know. I mean, it's a compliment to call a man a dog, but a terrible insult to call a woman. Why is that? Speaking of dogs and abusive metaphors, I can't let this one go by. My wife is from Iraq. And in Arabic, the worst thing you can do to insult somebody, almost the worst thing, is to call him a dog. A kalba, the masculine kalba, female. Well, we had a cat for many, many years. And this was an alley cat, and always used to scratch my wife, and it was a terrible thing, you know. And so whenever my wife got angry, she would call the cat dog. So it was always kelba, kelba. So somehow the cat was supposed to be insulted by being called a dog. So it always puzzled me. But anyway, different languages, different metaphors, huh? Sex is food. Women are food. What a dish. Huh? Is this interesting? A sexually active woman is bad. She's a tramp. Huh? A sexually active man is good. He's a stud. Huh? He's a player. These metaphors are often framed in terms of dominance and power. Huh? Sex is a hunt, a conquest. He tamed her. What's the Shakespearean play? Taming of the Shrew, of course. Sex is instruction. Huh? You could learn a lot from me, baby. Sex is triumph. I really put it to her. Sex is inflicting. Sex is triumph by inflicting pleasure. Boy, did I make her moan. Sex is madness. I'm wild with desire. I teach ESL down here at the Wilkes Center, and something came up in the class, and I asked the students, is Mexico dangerous? And it wasn't long after the shootings here, and I expected them to say, yes, these cartels are terrible and everything. Most of the students in my class are women and girls, and I was astonished when they said, oh yeah, Mexico is very dangerous because of the women. I said, the women? Yeah, because women get divorced and they're all looking for men. So the men are in danger. And they're looking at me like this, and I'm backing into a corner. But women have sexual power. They have electricity, huh? She turns me on. Women are electric. What else? Flirting is asking for it. She's just asking for it. Sex is power that women have over men. She leads me on. What else? Sex is possession. I'd like to have her. Sex is a sport. I hope to score. Huh? I struck out. I reached second base. And he's playing the field. I know Americans love sports. Canadians too, hockey and all that stuff. Sex is gambling. Sex is poker. Huh? If you play your cards right, you'll score. Sex is war, of course. Everything is war. I tried to get her to bed, but I got shot down. He's always hitting on women. Sex is an act of violence. He knocked her up. Sex is aggressive degradation. I don't need to give you an example of that. So metaphors can be, if used improperly, or if we don't understand, if we don't look carefully at the words that we're using. George Orwell talked about this when he talks about politics and the English language. If we don't really examine the words and the language that we're using, it can be very, very dangerous. Huh? But metaphors are not used in science, right? Well, of course they are, all the time. At least as much as they're used in poetry or religion or any other field of humanity. Einstein had thought experiments, right? He rode beams of light in his mind, of course. Robert Hooke, the guy who discovered cells, the human cell. Why did he call it a cell? Why are they called cells in our body? Well, after monastery cells. Because in monastery you had these little rooms where the monks lived, and you had many of them in a small area. And we pursue science with these metaphors. We want to believe that the universe is elegant. We talk about string theory. We use many metaphors in science. I want to skip ahead here because, as usual, I'm running out of time. One of the things about science or technology that bothers me, and I think bothers a lot of other people, and which is a very harmful metaphor, is when we think of the brain as a computer. We tend to think of our bodies and our brains as machines, and more recently we tend to think of them as computers. The problem with thinking of the brain as a computer is that then you have the perfect brain, as you have the perfect computer. And you have some computers that are faster than others, therefore some brains that are faster than others. You have normal brains, that sort of thing. So when you think of if we use those kind of metaphors to think of ourselves, to think of our brains, our minds, our bodies, it can be extremely harmful. People who have ADHD or autism or these so-called spectrum diseases, are they less human beings? I mean, because they don't have the perfect computer in their brain? What happens when we die? Well, when a computer dies, we throw it in the garbage heap, right? Is that what happens to us when we die? We just throw it in the garbage heap? Is that the metaphor that we want to live by? Recently, a psychotherapist suggested that a better metaphor for the human mind would be rainforest. The human brain is a rainforest. And with all kinds of things growing in it, with all kinds of connections, we can make zip lines through the rainforest and go from one place in the mind to another place in the mind. There are people like different plants in the rainforest. Some are big, some are small, some are this color, some are that color. So to say that we have to rid the world of ADHD or rid the world of autism is looking at things from a very mechanical point of view rather than an organic point of view. A lot more to say, but just before I end, Margaret asked me if I was going to talk about literature or make it literary, and I will. What is, I'll direct this to Americans, what is probably the most famous metaphorical poem in America? One that's taught in every school, one that you could probably recite by heart. Anybody want to name it? Huh? Pledge of Allegiance. Well, the road? I'm thinking of an American poem. Robert Frost, there you go. And what's the name of the poem? Okay, now that's interesting. Rosemary says it's the road not traveled. The road less traveled, is it? Is that the name of the poem? Actually, it's not. Most people, if you ask them, will say that. It was actually the name of, I think, a self-help book. And the author presumably based it on Frost's poem. Frost's poem is called The Road Not Taken. And there's a big difference there. Can I read it to you? Do I have time? Okay. I'll read it to you, then you tell me what it means. Well, no, actually, before I read it to you, you tell me what it means. How many of you now at the age of retirement or close to the age of retirement or past the age of retirement, how many of you have taken the road less traveled? How many of you believe you've taken the road less traveled? I think that's easily half, I would say, something like that, right? Okay, let me, now if you know anything about Robert Frost, you know that he liked to tease people. And his poem teases. And a lot of people don't understand the poem, but I'm sure you do. So, the road not taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one, sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other. as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. As for that passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning lay equally in leaves, no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Which road did he take? Which road did he take? Did he take the one less traveled by? No. Which road does he say? He predicts that in the future, when he's an old man, and he wants to be the hero of his own story, and he looks back on his life, he says that he will say that he has taken the road less traveled. And there's the metaphor. We lead our lives in metaphor. Right? These things often form the basis for, and we need to examine ourselves every day. As Socrates says, the unexamined life is not worth living. And metaphors very often are at the very core of who we think we are, who we think other people are, how we conceptualize the universe, all that sort of thing. Am I out of time? Did I make
More
it?
to say?
Give me a break, huh? Do you have other questions?
You want some questions?
Yeah, let's have questions and comments. Yes.
We have one over here.
Actually, this is just an example that I like about what coming to another world and learning a different language can do. It can give you a whole different way of looking at something that's very ordinary.
Absolutely.
So when I was doing the forms for coming down here, and where it would say housewife, in Spanish it's ama de casa, the one who loves the house.
Yeah.
And it just changed my whole attitude from always being the woman who worked and had my own living and had my own, profession. Now I can embrace la ama de casa.
That's right. It's often not until we learn other languages that we understand the limitations of our own metaphors.
Because in English it's a housewife. You're married to that house. My question was going to be, who said, if there's a fork in the road, take it?
I tend to eat with a spoon, but...
Yogi Bear.
Yogi Bear, okay. Rosemary.
I think if Robert Frost was alive today, and he thought about how many people had read his poem, and he thought about how he had taken the road less traveled by, because I'm very familiar with his biography, but he would rename the poem. And I also believe the essence of the poem is that there were two paths. And he being only one person was not able to travel both. And I would say that's what many of us down here have done. That we are aware that we cannot travel both. So whether it is the road less traveled by or not, we have chosen this one, and this one makes us very different. We are very different, the people down here.
That's true. Okay. I am very concerned about the one expression in Mexican that is padre and madre.
Oh, well.
And when it refers to padre, ay que padre, it really means, isn't it great, isn't it wonderful? And when you use the word madre, it means it's a derogatory word. It's bad luck. Can you explain that one?
Probably not, but unfortunately, much of Western mythology treats females as the evil temptress, right? In fact, we sort of can't make up our minds. Are women the Virgin Mary, the mother of Christ, or are they Mary Magdalene? So in the West we have this very confused attitude toward femininity. That's basically all I could say about that, I think. And it's very different in other cultures. Yeah.
I'll get you. I just wanted to say, John, I see what you're saying.
Thank you for your talk. Since living in Mexico, I've become much more aware of how often we speak in metaphors. And if you watch, the nightly news, you hear the commentators speaking in metaphors. And I often think, wow, if I were trying to learn English and listening to this, I'd be so confused. And same thing with the Spanish we hear spoken. It's full of metaphors. And so those of us who are trying to learn the language as we are trying to understand the culture, I think it's really important to have our teachers teach us the metaphors. For instance, when somebody says, aguas, aguas, they're saying, look out, be careful. So I think that's where we could really benefit, is by learning to understand each other's metaphors.
Metaphors are extremely difficult when we're learning language. There's one reason why it's very difficult to teach languages to computers, because metaphors are elusive as well as elusive. Normally, when we speak of being down, we speak of being disappointed or depressed or something like that. The other day in my class, one of the students asked me, what does down to earth mean? He's down to earth. And of course, she assumed that it meant he's depressed or he's low or something like that. And for me to try to explain what down to earth meant, that it had nothing to do with being depressed, that it had an entirely different meaning. So metaphors can often be very contradictory in that way. I was going to talk about stocks. Let me just very briefly say this. How many of you invest in the stock market? You might be interested in this. Business commentators, CNBC and whatnot, they use metaphors all the time. And what's so interesting is, when stocks are going up, what kind of metaphors do they use? They use agent metaphors. Stocks soar. Stocks, I have a list of them here. What is it? Well, crash is going down. That's an object metaphor. Okay, objects crash, living things, agents, soar, and well, skyrocket is more. Again, it's more agent, it's more object. But I have an interesting list of them here. What they determined was that people who invest, because most of the metaphors associated with rising stocks use animate beings as their source, almost like a bird soaring, that sort of thing. That people people tend to invest more and be more bullish when stocks are rising, precisely because they're agent metaphors. Because we think that a living thing, an animate thing, has a will and will continue on that course. And that's why people often don't follow the logical advice of selling high and buying low, because they imagine it's going to continue to soar, because birds continue to soar.
One more.
John, do you have any comment on why, at least in the Western world, we use the term you instead of I? You know, when you do this, then sometimes this happens to you.
That's a good question. No, I don't know.
I would like, if you would, just take a short time there and tell about your relationship with language and mathematics.
Oh, it's boring.
No, not at all.
So I worked for a long time as a computational linguist, and that's a fancy way of saying using statistics to try to analyze language. And so my academic career sort of come full circle. I started out as a biochemist, and that was before the days of the Human Genome Project. The only job I could get as a graduate biochemist was working in a pulp and paper mill, measuring the pulp as it came out, and I gave that up quickly. But today in biochemistry, in molecular biology, in the analysis of the human genome and other genomes, statistics becomes very important, of course, because DNA is basically a language. It's a language of 4 base pairs. What's interesting is the same algorithms are being used today to analyze language, to teach computers how to speak and recognize language. So if you use your iPhone, what's it called, Sirius? That technology uses the same algorithms that are used to analyze DNA sequences, because again, it's all language. So I worked in that field for many years, developing that sort of stuff. That's briefly it.
We have one last hand here, and we'll have to close it for the day.
I was wondering, I guess I'm not sure what the difference are between, say, euphemisms, similes, and metaphors. For example, in the financial world, which you touched on, counterfeiting is a pejorative term, but money printing became a pejorative term. Now they call it quantitative easing, but it's all the same thing. Can you discuss some of the ways that they use in propaganda to change these meanings?
Politicians are very good at that, of course, right? Democrats and Republicans, unfortunately we divide ourselves into these fake political divisions, frame their political arguments in terms of metaphors very often, right? So they say tax relief. Who talks about tax relief, Republicans or Democrats? Republicans mainly talk about tax relief. When they talk about, when Republicans talk about, I'm very apolitical, so don't misunderstand any Republicans in the audience. But when Republicans talk about tax relief, for example, they also talk about partnership with business, right? Democrats call it handouts. But Republicans talk about partner. Again, all these metaphors. Again, I've got listen. I can send you these things if you like. But exactly that. So if somebody is trying to convince you of something, persuade you, use propaganda to change your mind, he's going to use metaphors to do it. And that's why we have to look at these metaphors very carefully, exactly as you suggested. Yeah.
Well, thank you so very much. What an interesting A veritable John Milton.
And now you can all read the traditional Chinese.
Yes, you can.